Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome all to today's reading from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. We're going to be starting reading from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita today. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langate kirim kripat adesha gurum dinitarinam paramanantamatam Sri Chaitanyeshwaram Hari Om Tat Sat. First of all, introduction of this book. Originally delivered as 5 morning lectures on the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the authoritative biography of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by Dasa Kaviraja Goswami, before the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, New York City, April 10th to 14th in 1967. The word Chaitanya means living force, Charita means character, and Amrita means immortal. As living entities, we can move, but a table cannot because it does not possess living force. Movement and activity may be considered signs or symptoms of the living force. Indeed, it may be said that there can be no activity without the living force. Although the living force is present in the material condition, this condition is not Amrita, immortal. The words Chaitanya Charitamrita then may be translated as the character of the living force in immortality. But how is this living force displayed immortally? It is not displayed by man or any other creature in this material universe, for none of us are immortal in these bodies. We possess the living force, we perform activities, and we are immortal by our nature and constitution. But the material nature into which we have been put does not allow our immortality to be displayed. It is stated in the Katha Upanishad that eternality and the living force belong to both ourselves and God. Although this is true in that both God and ourselves are immortal, there is a difference. As living entities, we perform many activities, but we have a tendency to fall down into material nature. God has no such tendency. Being all-powerful, He never comes down under the control of material nature. Indeed, material nature is but one display of His inconceivable energies. An analogy will help us understand the distinction between ourselves and God. From the ground, we may see only clouds in the sky, but if we fly above the clouds, we can see the sun shining. From the skyscrapers and cities seem very tiny. Similarly, from God's position, this entire material creation is insignificant. The tendency of the living entity is to come down from the heights where everything can be seen in perspective. God, however, does not have this tendency. The Supreme Lord is not subject to fall down into illusion Maya any more than the sun is subject to fall beneath the clouds. Impersonalist philosophers, that is the Mayavadis, maintain that both the living entity and God Himself are under the control of Maya when they come into this material world. This is the fallacy of their philosophy. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu should therefore not be considered one of us. He is Krishna Himself, the supreme living entity, and as such He never comes under the cloud of Maya. Krishna, His expansions, and even His higher devotees never fall into the clutches of illusion. Lord Chaitanya came to earth simply to preach Krishna Bhakti, love of Krishna. In other words, He is Lord Krishna Himself, teaching the living entities the proper way to approach Krishna. He is like a teacher who, seeing a student do poorly, takes up a pencil and writes, saying, "Do it like this, A, B, C." From this, one should not foolishly think that the teacher is learning his ABCs. Similarly, although Lord Chaitanya appears in the guise of a devotee, we should not foolishly think He is an ordinary human being. We should always remember that Lord Chaitanya is Krishna, God Himself, teaching us how to become Krishna conscious, and we must study Him in that light. In the Bhagavad Gita 18.66, Lord Krishna says, Give up all your nonsense and surrender to me. I will protect you. We say, oh, surrender, but I have so many responsibilities. And Maya illusion says to us, don't do it, or you will be out of my clutches. Just stay in my clutches and I will kick you. It is a fact that we are constantly being kicked by Maya, just as the male ass is kicked in the face by the she ass when he comes for sex. Similarly, cats and dogs are always fighting and whining when they have sex. Even an elephant in the jungle is caught up by the use of trained she-elephant who leads him into a pit. We should learn by observing these tricks of nature. Maya has many ways to entrap us, and her strongest shackle is the female. Of course, in actuality, we are neither male nor female, for these designations refer only to the outer dress, the body. We are actually Krishna's servants. But in conditioned lives, we are shackled by the iron chains in the form of beautiful women. Thus, every male is bound by sex, and therefore one who wishes to gain liberation from the material clutches must first learn to control the sex urge. Unrestricted sex puts one fully in the clutches of illusion. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu officially renounced this illusion at the age of 24. Although his wife was 16 and his mother 70, and he was the only male in the family, although he was a Brahman and not so rich, he took sannyas. He renounced the renounced order of life and thus extricated himself from family entanglement. If we wish to become fully Krishna consciousness, we have to give up the shackles of Maya, or if we remain with Maya, we should live in such a way that we will not be subject to illusion, as did the many householders among the Lord Chaitanya's closest devotees. With his followers in the renounced order, however, Lord Chaitanya was very strict. He even banished Junior Haridas, an important kirtan leader, for glancing lustfully at a woman. The Lord told him, "You are living with me in the renounced order, and yet you are looking at a woman with a lust." Other devotees of the Lord had appealed to him to forgive Haridas, but he replied, "All of you can forgive him and live with him. I shall live alone." On the other hand, when the Lord learned that the wife of one of his householder devotees was pregnant, he asked that the baby be given a certain auspicious name. So while the Lord approved of householders having regulated sex, he was like a thunderbolt with those in the renounced order who tried to cheat by the method known as drinking water underwater while bathing on a fast day. In other words, he tolerated no hypocrisy among his followers. From the Chaitanya Charitamrita, we learn how Lord Chaitanya taught people to break the shackles of Maya and become immortal. Thus, as mentioned above, the title may be properly translated as the character of the living force in immortality. The Supreme Living Force is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is also the Supreme Entity. There are innumerable living entities, and all of them are individuals. This is very easy to understand. We are all individuals in our thoughts and desires, and the Supreme Lord is also an individual person. He is different, though, in that he is the leader and the one whom no one can excel. Among the minute living entities, one being can excel another in one capacity or another. Like each of these living entities, the Lord is an individual, but he is different in that he is the supreme individual. God is also infallible. And thus in the Bhagavad Gita, he is addressed as Achyut, which means he who never falls down. This name is appropriate because in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjun falls into illusion, but Krishna does not. Krishna himself reveals his infallibility when he says to Arjun, "When I appear in this world, I do so by my own internal potency." Bhagavad Gita chapter 4 verse 6. Thus we should not think that Krishna is overpowered by the material potency when he is in the material world. Neither Krishna nor his incarnations ever come under material nature. They are totally free. Indeed, in Srimad Bhagavatam, one who has a godly nature is actually defined as one who is not affected by the modes of material nature, although in material nature. If even a devotee can attain this freedom, then what to speak of the Supreme Lord? The real question is, how can we remain unpolluted by material contamination while in the material world? Srila Rupa Goswami explains that we can remain uncontaminated while in the world if we simply make it our ambition to serve Krishna. One may then justifiably ask, how can I serve? It is not simply a matter of meditation, which is just an activity of the mind, but the performing of practical work for Krishna. In such work, we should leave no resource unused. Whatever is there, whatever we have should be used for Krishna. We can use everything: typewriters, automobiles, airplanes, missiles. If we simply speak to people about Krishna consciousness, we are also rendering service. If our mind, senses, speech, money, and energies are thus engaged in the service of Krishna, then we are no longer in material nature. By virtue of spiritual consciousness or Krishna consciousness, we transcend the platform of material nature. It is a fact that Krishna, his expansions, and his devotees, that is, those who work for him, are not in material nature, although people with a poor fund of knowledge think that they are. The Chaitanya Charitamrita teaches that the spirit soul is immortal and that our activities in the spiritual world are also immortal. The Mayavadis, who hold the view that the Absolute is impersonal and formless, contend that a realized soul has no need to talk, but the Vaishnavas, devotees of Krishna, contend that when one reaches the stage of self-realization, he really begins to talk. Previously, we only talked nonsense. The Vaishnav says, now let us begin our real talks of Krishna, in support of the view that the self-realized remain silent. The Mayavadis are fond of using the example of the water pot, maintaining that when a pot is not filled with water, it makes a sound, but when it is filled, it makes no sound. But are we water pots? How can we be compared to them? A good analogy utilizes as many similarities between the two objects as possible. A water pot is not an active living force, but we are. Ever silent meditation may be adequate for a water pot, but not for us. Indeed, when a devotee realizes how much he has to say about Krishna, 24 hours in a day are not sufficient. It is a fool who celebrated as long as he does not speak, for when he breaks his silence, his lack of knowledge is exposed. The Chaitanya Charitamrita shows that there are many wonderful things to discover by glorifying the Supreme. In the beginning of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraja Goswami writes, I offer my respects to my spiritual masters. He uses the plural here to indicate the disciplic succession, or the Guru Parampara. He offers obeisances not only to his spiritual master alone, but to the whole Parampara, the chain of disciplic succession beginning with Lord Krishna himself. Thus the author addresses the Guru in the plural to show the highest respect for all his predecessor spiritual masters. After offering obeisances to the disciplic succession, the author pays obeisances to all other devotees, to the Lord himself, to his incarnations, to the expansions of Godhead, and to the manifestation of Krishna's internal energy. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, sometimes called Krishna Chaitanya, is the embodiment of all these. He is God, Guru, devotee, incarnation, internal energy, and expansion of God. As his associate Nityananda, he is the first expansion of God. As Advaita, he is an incarnation as Gadadhar. He is the internal potency, and as Srivas, he is the marginal living entity in the role of a devotee. Thus, Krishna should not be thought of as being alone, but should be considered as eternally existing with all his manifestations, as described by Ramanujacharya in the Vishishta Advaita philosophy. God's energies, expansions, and incarnations are considered to be oneness in diversity. In other words, God is not separate from all these. Everything together is God. Actually, the Chaitanya Charitamrita is not intended for the novice, for it is the postgraduate study of spiritual knowledge. Ideally, one begins with Bhagavad Gita and advances through Srimad Bhagavatam to the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Although all these great scriptures are on the same absolute level, for the sake of comparative study, the Chaitanya Charitamrita is considered to be on the highest platform. Every verse in it is perfectly composed. In the second verse of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the author offers his obeisances to Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. He compares them to the sun and the moon because they dissipate the darkness of the material world. In this instance, the sun and the moon have risen together. In the Western world, where the glories of Lord Chaitanya are relatively unknown, one may inquire, who is Krishna Chaitanya? The author of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srila Kaviraja, answers that question in the third verse of his book. Generally, in the Upanishads, the Supreme Absolute Truth is described in an impersonal way, but the personal aspect of the Absolute Truth is mentioned in the Ishopanishad, where we find the following verse. Hiranyamena patrena satyasya pitiham mukham tattvam pushan apavrinu satya dharmaya drishtaye. O my Lord, sustainer of all that lives, your real face is covered by a dazzling effulgence. Kindly remove that covering and exhibit yourself to your pure devotee. Shri Upanishad 15. The impersonalists do not have the power to go beyond the effulgence of God and arrive at the personality of Godhead from whom this effulgence is emanating. The Ishopanishad is a hymn to that personality of Godhead. It is not that the impersonal Brahman is denied, it is also described, but that Brahman is revealed to be the glaring effulgence of the body of Lord Krishna. And in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, we learn that Lord Chaitanya is Krishna himself. In other words, Sri Krishna Chaitanya is the basis of the impersonal Brahman, the Paramatma, or Super Soul, who is present within the heart of every living entity and within every atom of this universe, is but the partial representation of Lord Chaitanya. Therefore, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, being the basis of both Brahman and all-pervading Paramatma as well, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As such, he is full in 6 opulences: wealth, fame, strength, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. In short, we should know that he is Krishna, God, and that nothing is equal to or greater than him. There is nothing superior to be conceived. He is the Supreme Person. Srila Rupa Goswami, a confidential devotee taught for more than 10 days continually by Lord Chaitanya, wrote, Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Tvishe Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya, who is more magnanimous than any other avatar, even Krishna himself, because he is bestowing freely what no one else has ever given, pure love of Krishna. This is the Pranam Mantra for Mahaprabhu, Krishna Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya's teachings begin from the point of surrender to Krishna. He does not pursue the paths of Karma Yoga or Jnana Yoga or Hatha Yoga, but begins at the end of material existence, at the point where one gives up all material attachment. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna begins his teachings by distinguishing the soul from matter. And in the 18th chapter, he concludes at the point where the soul surrenders to him in devotion. The Mayavadis would have all talk cease there, but at the point the real discussion only begins. As the Vedanta Sutra says at the very beginning, Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Now let us begin to inquire about the Supreme Absolute Truth. Rupa Goswami thus praises Lord Chaitanya as the most munificent incarnation of all, for he gives the greatest gift by teaching the highest form of devotional service. In other words, he answers the most important inquiries that anyone can make. There are different stages of devotional service and God realization. Strictly speaking, anyone who accepts that the existence of God is situated in devotional service. To acknowledge that God is great is something but not much. Lord Chaitanya, preaching as an Acharya, a great teacher, taught that we can enter into relationship with God and actually become God's friend, parent or lover. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna showed Arjun his universal form because Arjun was his very dear friend. Upon seeing Krishna as the Lord of the universes, however, Arjuna asked Krishna to forgive the familiarity of his friendship. Lord Chaitanya goes beyond this point. Through Lord Chaitanya, we can become friends with Krishna, and there will be no limit to his friendship. We can become friends of Krishna not in awe or adoration, but in complete freedom. We can even relate to God as his father or mother. This is the philosophy not only of the Chaitanya Charitamrita but of Srimad Bhagavatam as well. There are no other scriptures in the world in which God is treated as the son of a devotee. Usually God is seen as the Almighty Father who supplies the demands of his sons. The great devotees, however, sometimes treat God as a son in their execution of devotional service. The son demands and the father and mother supply, and in supplying Krishna, the devotee becomes like a father or mother. Instead of taking from God, we give to God. It was in this relationship that Krishna's mother Yashoda told the Lord, "Here, eat this or you will die. Eat nicely." In this way, Krishna, although the proprietor of everything, depends on the mercy of his Lord. This is uniquely high level of friendship in which the devotee actually believes himself to be the father or mother of Krishna. However, Lord Chaitanya's greatest gift was his teaching that Krishna can be treated as one's lover. In this relationship, the Lord becomes so much attached to his devotee that he expresses his inability to reciprocate. Krishna was so obliged to them, to the gopis, the cowherd girls of Vrindavan, that he felt unable to return their love. "I cannot repay your love," he told them. "I have no more assets to give." Devotional service on this highest, most excellent platform of lover and the beloved, which had never been given by any previous incarnation or Acharya, was given by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Therefore, Krishnadas Kaviraj, quoting Srila Rupa Goswami, writes in the 4th verse of this book, Lord Chaitanya is Krishna in his yellow complexion, and he is Sachinandan, the son of Mother Shachi. He is the most charitable personality because he came to deliver Krishna Prema, unalloyed love for Krishna for everyone. May you always keep him in your hearts. It will be easy to understand Krishna through him. I think we still have got some more of reading of the introduction left. So we will continue from here onwards next time. Thank you for joining. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna.